President Johnson, we're ready to begin the meeting.
It is 4:30 on Thursday, June 23rd, 2022, and I call this meeting of the Meridian Historic Preservation Commission to order. Roll call, Blaine Johnston's here, Destiny Hart,
Here.
Tyler Ricks, MJ Gosh, John Dinger, Jody Alt.
Here.
Thank you. Jack Keller, not here. Adoption of the agenda.
Mr. President,
Commissioner Alt.
I move that we adopt the agenda.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Alt, seconded by Commissioner Hart for adoption of the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Approval of our minutes from May 26, 2022.
Move that we adopt.
Motion by Commissioner Dinger, seconded by Commissioner Hart for approval of our minutes of May 26. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Approval of our monthly financial statements.
Mr. President,
Commissioner Alt.
I move that we approve the monthly financial statement.
Motion by Commissioner Alt, seconded by Commissioner Hart for approval of our monthly financial statements. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries, thank you. On to old business. So discuss and recommend project sites to be added to the virtual tours. So Ms. Schiffler, could you give us an update from Hull Filmed, please?
Yes, thank you. So I received an initial estimate for sort of all the properties that had been discussed. And then asked for an updated one from Whole Film. So I have a updated one, and it's $4,000, and it includes it includes 4 locations, which are at Idaho and 3rd, which is at Centennial Park, and the community center, which will be torn down soon. At Idaho and 2nd, which is where Rice Pharmacy and Idaho building is. And a 3rd location at Idaho Street in Maine, which is at the Modern Woodman Hall. And the 4th location at Idaho Street in Meridian, which is the inner urban depot. So those are all 4 sites along Idaho Street, kind of at each intersection. And then I hadn't asked him to include it, but he included another 2 locations at Highway 16. So all of those locations are included with this quote. So if you have any questions, please fire away.
I think the Idaho Street is a logical progression since we've done up through City Hall and that area. So I think that's a logical progression to take part of that next for the virtual tours. I still don't know. Highway 16 has got to get done because of the work that the state's going to do there. I don't know what the time frame is. Barbara, I'm going to talk to you for just a second if I could. Do you know timeline for the Highway 16 project by the state of Idaho?
Not anymore. I was under the impression that they were moving forward on a fast track with it. And with, construction was beginning pretty quickly, but I really don't know.
Okay. That brings me to another point, and where I'm going to leapfrog a little bit. Do you know if there was a Section 106 review done on that project?
Yes, there was. We were involved in it, and it was a 2-phase Section 106 project. They did the first phase in 2008, and we recorded 124 properties on a 7-mile stretch. And then we updated that report 3 years ago. So yeah, they did do they had to do a pretty complete review of that whole project.
Do you know, is there a list of properties completed by that, and how can we get a hold of one?
There is, and what you can do is you can probably contact the Idaho State Historic Preservation Office and check with them and ask them for the full report that was done in 2000. Well, that would be, what year are we to? It was 2019. And that will have the list of all of those properties at that time. And I have to say that since we did the work in 2008, many of those properties, of course, were removed.
Right. We don't have legal here, so I'm just gonna ask the question. I may get in trouble later on. And I may be mistaken. Is there reimbursement from a section 106 review if historical properties are found? And if so, do you know if municipalities are entitled to that reimbursement?
That is not a question I can answer. I do know that if something is eligible to the National Register of Historic Places, they have to do a number of things to avoid those properties, which they did with the first phase of the project. And if, you know, if they have to do mitigation or something, then they reach out to all the stakeholders. But I don't know about reimbursement for properties that are historic.
All right. Thought I'd ask. Thank you. Since we've already got X amount of dollars, $11,000 left on this year's budget, and if we agree for Whole Films to do this work, that's going to be 4,000 of that. Is anyone opposed to starting doing Idaho Street and get that section completed before the end of the year? And I guess I'd have to talk to Brandon again and see exactly what he wants to do on Highway 16 to see if that $4,000 is going to cover both of those, or
It does.
it does. So I guess, yeah, let's go ahead and proceed. Well, I'm going to ask, do we have, or can we get a motion to approve Whole Films to do a virtual tour of the Idaho Street locations stated by Ms. Schiffler and Highway 16 sites that Whole Films presented to us? So if we can get a motion for that. That made sense, everybody.
Mr. President,
Commissioner Dinger.
I will try my best here. I would make a motion that we appropriate $4,000 to hire Whole Film to start the filming on.
And Commissioner Dinger, do you have your microphone on? That might not be audible for the people outside of this room.
Is it now? Is it? Hello? All right, do I need to re-motion that?
Oh, there. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, President, I would motion that we appropriate $4,000 to Whole Films to file the previously discussed locations.
I'll second that.
Motion by Commissioner Dinger, seconded by Commissioner Alt for an expenditure not to approve, not to exceed $4,000 for whole films to add virtual tours on the Idaho street locations and Highway 16. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you so very much. We will go on to reports. Project report, Meridian Speedway Historic Nomination. Barb, you're up.
All right, well, I'm very happy to say that on June 4th, the Idaho State Historic Sites Review Board did approve the Meridian Speedway nomination. And so the next step is that it will be wending its way over to the National Park Service. And if they approve the listing will be made in October and it will be officially on the National Register. So I was pretty excited about that. Cassandra asked if I would put together some background information about the National Register of Historic Places that explains the process. I'm going to tie it into talking a little bit about the Meridian Speedway, and it will also give background if you all decide to move forward with the nomination for the Zamzows property. So I'm going to try and share my screen. Let's hope I can do it this time. And hey, there we are.
Looks good.
Good, I'm glad. Okay, question is, there we go. So what is the National Register of Historic Places? I think we've talked about this before a little bit briefly. It is the official list of properties which are considered important in our past and are worthy of preservation. It is a program of the National Park Service, and it's administered in Idaho by the Idaho State Historic Preservation Office, which is SHPO. And the program recognizes buildings, sites, structures, objects, and districts that are significant in American history, architectural history, engineering, archaeology, and/or culture. It is largely, an honor program, carries with it no restrictions whatsoever to a private property owner, including demolition. It only regulates the use of federal funds that might affect the property, and there are no legal requirements on private property owners. Once the property is listed, you are free to make any alterations that you want to make with private funds, and you don't need any kind of approval from the SHPO or anyone else to do that. We think it's really important for people to understand that. I think there's a misconception many times that people think if it's on the register, that means nothing can be done to it. In fact, when we were working on the nomination for the Speedway, that is one of the discussions we had with the folks at the Dairy Board, as well as the folks at the Meridian Speedway. So again, it does not restrict any private property owners. Any, changes can be made. You can dispose of the property if you so desire. One of the great things it does is you can actually try and get some grants or low interest loans to help with the property. And they have a whole program, a tax credit program that lets you apply for funding. And so if something is on a property, if something is listed on the National Register, that is a way that people can use tax credits to improve a property. It doesn't require that the properties have to be restored in any manner once they are listed. One of the things about listing is that to be on the National Register, the property, the site, the structure has to retain integrity. And typically that means it has to be in pretty good shape or has not lost its architectural or historic integrity. It doesn't require that property owners have to open their property for visitors. And it does not guarantee, unfortunately, the preservation of historic properties. Again, it's an honorary deal. And so, unfortunately, I wish that if it was on the National Register, there would be no demolition, but that's not the case. And what are the standards to be listed in the register? It has to be 50 years or older. In some instances, if it's younger than 50 years of age, there is a special section, a special requirement that can be basically researched and figured out to determine if it has special significance if it's less than that 50 years or older. We had to do that with the Speedway because of those bleachers, which are not quite of historic age, but were very important to the integrity of the district as a whole. And we were able to although the whole site itself was of the historic age, there were a couple of elements that were not. And so we had to make a case for them not being 50 years old, but yet contributing to that district. So that was an unusual circumstance here. Retain their historic appearance, which is called integrity. Again, they have to be historically important, which is the significance of the property. And the significance criteria are below. It's the association with events that have made a significant contribution to broad patterns of history, agriculture, mining, community planning, homesteading. Those are some examples. Association with the productive lives of persons significant to our past. And oftentimes people will say, well, so-and-so, the leader of a community, lived in that house, so why can't we put it on the register? It has to be someone who is extremely significant throughout the nation. So you would be looking for someone who might be a national leader, George Washington, of course, or perhaps a very significant architect like Frank Lloyd Wright. But just because the mayor of Meridian lived there in 1901 is not enough to make a property eligible for listing. It has to have an embodiment of the distinct characteristics of a type, a period, or method of construction. For instance, that means that the building is one of a kind architecturally. I'm just trying to think of any building in Meridian that might fall under that criterion, and unfortunately nothing's coming to me right now. But often if the building has retained its style at the time that it was constructed, that would be why it would be eligible under criterion C. And the last criterion is one that is specifically for archaeology, and it's properties that have yielded or may be likely to yield information which is important to pre-contact or post-contact. And of course, we don't do those sites as we are not archaeologists. And the process is actually can take 1 to 2 years, which is exactly what happened with the Meridian Speedway. The first thing that happens is if you do have a property that you desire to have listed to the National Register, we have to complete this preliminary eligibility questionnaire. And that basically outlines the background information on a site. We have to do an architectural description. You take basic photographs, you put together a brief and concise history that explains the background of the property. And then you also have to state why you think this property is eligible to the National Register. And at the same time, you need to make sure that you have the property owner's permission to put this or to nominate this property to the National Register. The next step is that you submit that then to SHPO for concurrence, which doesn't take very long. And then once they agree and say, yes, move ahead, if the site has not been previously recorded on the Idaho Historic Sites Inventory form, then you need to prepare that piece of paperwork. And then you go into doing the nomination. The nomination can take, writing it can take anywhere from 100 to 300 or 400 hours. It's quite a lengthy process. Then you have to submit your draft nomination to SHPO in the January before you want the property listed to prepare it for review by the Idaho Historic Sites Review Board. And that is now on the calendar. They have it the first Saturday in June. And then at that meeting, if the nomination is approved, then it will move forward in the summer months to the fall to be approved by the National Park Service. Typically in January, that is the time period when SHPO will review the nomination. And if they have any concerns or requirements for additional information, you will have the time from January until June to work on it. And a successful nomination is the best when we as a consultant work very closely with SHPO. And then how long is the process? I just went over that. It can take anywhere from 1 to 2 years, depending upon the complexity, how complex the site is. The Meridian Speedway was one of the most complex sites I'd ever worked on. And then the sites that are in Meridian that are currently listed on the National Register is this list here. And you all may be familiar with these buildings. The R.H. and Jesse Bell House on Pine Street, the Clara Hill House on North Main Street, the E.F. Hunt House, the Meridian Exchange Bank, The Mittlighter Farmstead Historic District is no longer extant. That those buildings were demolished. The Mountain States Telephone and Telegraph Building, the Halbert and Grace Neal House, and the Tolith House on East State Street. So now that we can add the Meridian Speedway to that list, crossing our fingers that there's no glitch, but that the National Park Service doesn't agree with the Idaho Historic Sites Review Board, but that does not happen at all, as far as I know. So here is the Meridian Speedway. And one of the things that I had to do after the SHPO reviewed it is they required additional photographs. They actually requested that we include more information on a few of the buildings. During the time that we started working on the nomination, if you look at the center picture that shows the track, and you can see the water tower in the background, that center section was removed. They had a training track there for a couple of years, but they took it out. So we had to update photographs to make sure that all of the buildings and the track and the other contributing objects were all up to date. And why did it end up being nominated, and what was it nominated under, what criterion? It was nominated under criterion A for its historical association with the agricultural, social, and recreational history of Meridian and Ada County. Besides its use for the annual Dairy Days, which connects residents to Meridian's agricultural history, the Speedway is one of 4 paved quarter-mile tracks in Idaho and the only continually running racetrack in the state. The activities of the Speedway have supported local businesses, attracted crowds of fans to events through the racing season, as well as bringing nationally sanctioned racing events to Southwest Idaho. And for over 72 years, the Meridian Speedway has been an entertainment and recreation center for Southwest Idaho. And this unique collaboration among local community groups created a vital sports facility that has continued to thrive as Meridian transitioned from an agricultural to an urban community. And I believe as I'm giving this presentation today, is Dairy Days kicking off this week? I believe it's just getting ready. Yep.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
And this is for some folks who weren't familiar with the project. We included a lot of historic images so that you could see the transition over time and how the setting has changed. The setting is one of the important integrity requirements for a site. And although Meridian has grown around the Speedway itself retained its setting as a raceway. All of the buildings basically remained in place. And if you had been a visitor to the Speedway in 1954 or 1964, when you return to the Speedway today, it still has the same setting with the buildings, the track, and the grandstands all in the same place. And again, it is very unusual because of this association with both agriculture and racing. I believe from the Historic Sites Review Board, there is no other facility that is quite like the Speedway, combining these two different elements. And this is just, again, another great image from the Meridian Historical Society. I do understand that the collections of the Historical Society have been moved to the public library, and I may need to update some of the captions in the nomination to show that transition over time as far as the collections go. And then these are those early incorporation records for the Meridian Dairy and Stock shows. So all of this type of background information was included in the National Register nomination. And I believe Cassandra has a copy of it, which if anybody wants to read it, I'm sure Cassandra will be happy to share. And again, I just love this. Here's some more of those early views. This 1949 view of the dairy ground shows. You can see that they actually used canvas covered livestock sheds. They did not have any physical permanent structures at this time. So these were just the images that we included. And of course, I think the most iconic building at the site is the Cattle Exhibit Building, which was constructed in 1958. It was constructed in 53, and then there was a fire in 58, and they had to reconstruct part of it. But because they built those grandstands on top in 1963, the Idaho SHPO staff reviewers were enthralled with this building. So this is one of the very iconic buildings for the Speedway. And again, this is just background information included in the nomination that supported the history of the site and its importance to the community. And we were very fortunate to build a relationship with the Idaho Racing Historical Society, because they have an incredible collection of historic images, not only of the Speedway, but of other racing facilities around the state. And this early photo from 1955 shows midget cars racing around the dirt track. The timeline there shows you 1950 is when the Meridian Athletic Association was organized, and they were the group behind bringing racing to the track. The dirt track was built at the Dairy Show grounds, and they immediately began to have races in the summer and raise money for local youth activities. And one of their coups, as you can see in this photo, you see the lights in the background, which were purchased from the old Boise Junior College. Those lights are still present on the at the Speedway today. And then in 1953 is when the Meridian Racing Association was organized, and that is who oversaw the events at the Speedway. Today, of course, the Speedway is leased from the Dairy Board, the Dairy Show Board, and it is run by Adam Nelson and another organization, and they continue to use it as it was used in 1951. And again, just some more backup information that we used in the nomination. And this is one was very important because we had to make sure that we were consistently showing the historic images and how things either changed or did not change. And these are our photos today. Again, the photo on the left is dated. I took that 2 years ago. It's a Meridian Dairy Days photo. And there have been changes since we started on this nomination. But anyway, I was very happy and very pleased that we were able to finally get it through the process, and working with SHPO, able to have the approval of the Meridian, or of the Historic Sites Review Board. So that's my presentation on the Speedway. And I did offer, I would really like the opportunity at some point. I think it would be fabulous if we could do some sort of a tour of the facility, perhaps as you're planning for a preservation month, maybe next year. Maybe we can work with, and I say we because I would be happy to lead the tour, but maybe we could work with Adam Nelson and set a time. And that might be a really kind of interesting thing to do during Preservation Month in May. So just some food for thought for next year. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Did SHPO or the Idaho listing have any comments about the nomination?
Oh, they did. They had comments back in January, and that is when I was spending time doing, updating it and editing it. In particular, they wanted to make certain that the statement that supports the integrity of the site, that the fact that you have this historic district that has 36 features, and many of the features are what they call non-contributing. So they are after the period of significance, which is 1951 to 1980. So much of what we had to do between January and June was really write an argument that even though you had these non-contributing structures, the overall setting, the original features, which are the track, the grandstands, the bleachers, all of those things remain as they did in the 1950s when it was begun. And so even though you have these later buildings, it can still be looked at as, intact, an intact facility. So that took a little bit of work. And the SHPO actually did consult with their National Register liaison at the National Park Service. And so I had some guidance from him as far as how we needed to work on that with the nomination. And I have to say, the reviewer was excited to have this nomination come forward. He's a race car enthusiast, and so he was very, very excited to see this particular property and the unusual combination of agriculture and racing. He hadn't seen that before either.
So explain to me, and I don't know the exact difference, the difference between the Meridian Speedway would be listed as a National List of Historic Places. What's the difference with that and a historic district, like the Mitlighter Farms?
Okay, so the Meridian Speedway is being listed as a historic district.
Okay,
Okay, it is because of the number of buildings that are on the site. You have multiple buildings, and multiple buildings make up a district.
okay,
So if it had just been like the water tower, if the water tower were going to be nominated to the National Register, it would be a single
okay.
structure.
Gotcha, perfect. Any other questions for Barbara?
Thank you.
One thing that I just wanted to add, thank you so much, Barbara, for all of the work that I know that you have put into this. Also, the city has a strategic plan, like a massive comprehensive plan, and then a lot of smaller goals that sort of trickle down. And this completing this is one of the goals that the city has for me.
Okay.
So that's very good.
Glad to help out.
Yeah, the other one related to the Historic Preservation Commission is along with preserving the historic buildings, events, heritage, and identity through active efforts with community stakeholders. Within that goal was utilizing the Historic Register to identify significant recognition of Meridian properties, and so the Speedway was one. And then the other goal that they have is investigate new locations to add to the Historic Register. So just putting that out there as we talk about the next couple of projects.
So with that, we just have to wait until this fall when the National Park Service announces. Okay,
You'll get official notice. You will get official notice. You'll get a letter from the Idaho State Historic Preservation Office when they get the official notice from the Park Service. So you'll have official recognition will be coming directly to you.
okay. That gonna go to the mayor, the city clerk's office? Who is that gonna go to? Do you know?
I believe it will go to you all first, and probably a copy to the mayor. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And along with the Speedway project, if it gets listed, assuming it gets listed, we probably want to think about signage. And I don't know, Barbara, maybe you have some thoughts about signage and what that should look like for a national historic property on the registry.
They actually, through the National Park Service, you can actually acquire a plaque that is, it's a basically, if you look at houses that are on the National Register, they usually do have a plaque that is identical that says it's on the National Register of Historic Places, and it will identify at what time the name of it and when it was put on the register. And that is something that you can order through the National Park Service. I think once you get your letter, official letter, they probably have information about that. But you all might want to consider something more, perhaps something that is along the right of way, on Meridian Road or something, so that as people walking by might see something. I think it would be an opportunity if you all are building the interpretation and the interpretive signage around the city, you might want to consider having something placed there at the site. And my suggestion would be, you can often, I think you may have done this already, but the community enhancement grants through the Idaho State Historical Society fund up to $2,500 for different projects. And that might be something you all might want to look at next year. I think that the grant application closes soon, like in July, but they offer it every year. And that might be a really great way to partner with the people at the Speedway and the Dairy Board, perhaps, and do a teaming project there. So that's some, something to think about. Another way to also expand. I know you all have that great walking tour, and but it might be another way to have something that's outside of the immediate downtown core. So.
Okay. That brings up an interesting point, because we've always wanted to look at expanding our walking tour app, is putting the Speedway on the app. Because we can take the film or the photos that we've already had done, and then take part of the narrative that Barb's done for the registry and put into it. So perfect. Thank you. Any other questions for Barb regarding the Speedway? And we will go on to item 5 for reconnaissance of historic Meridian properties, Main Street survey. So we are limited on our budget for next year, Barb. So between doing work on the mill for listing or working on a survey of North Meridian, is there one of those that you can get done so we can pay you for a portion of the work by the time the fiscal year ends, the end of September?
Well, I think I sent over to Cassandra a possible suggestion, and I'm always kind of torn. I mean, I think the Zamzows Mill definitely should be nominated to the register, and we would be able to begin work. We wouldn't be able to finish the whole process before September 30th, mainly because we have to fulfill the requirements of SHPO. And so we would be able to, I think, do research, do the initial PEQ form, do the site survey, that type of thing. But we wouldn't be able to write the actual nomination. There isn't time to do that, but there would be time to begin. And then for the windshield survey, perhaps that's something you all might want to think about and discuss a little bit more. Based on your suggestion for the boundaries, I had a map. I don't know if I sent it over to, I think I sent it over to Cassandra, but I ended up driving around the area and then looking at the historic properties. And I ended up with about 37 blocks between Broadway up to Cherry Lane and Fairview. And then I think I ended up on East 4th going over to First Street, because when I looked at the properties around, it appeared that you began to get intrusions on the north, over by Fairview and whatnot. And then you also had some newer construction, but it looks like that part of the city is still fairly intact and includes properties built, I think, between, the early 1920s up until the 40s or 50s. And so with those reconnaissance level surveys, those are basically very brief. You get to do a visual. So you take a photograph and you fill out some specific information on the Idaho Historic Sites Inventory form. And from that, you make a determination if a property is potentially eligible. And then that gives you sort of an idea of what historic properties you might have in the area. It will also pick up properties that have been previously surveyed, because I know that Meridian has done considerable work in the past. And so we would note changes over time. I mean, perhaps a building was documented in 1991 and now it's no longer there. So we would update the recording that was already done. But for that project, again, these take a little bit of time. And for that project, we thought we would be able to do what we called phase 1, which was basically from Broadway Avenue up to, I can't remember which street it is, but I think it was a 4-block radius to the north, and then the parameters that we had set on either side. And that would include doing the photography and then filling out basic information. But again, it would take a few more months to do the whole process. So,
And I'm torn because I want to get the mill listed. I really like to see that done. But I also know that part of our requirements from SHPO to remain a CLG is to have that site survey completed by the time we have our next meeting with SHPO, which I think is in probably 2 years. So I'd have to go back to hold of SHPO and find out when they're going to do that again. So I'm torn as to what's going to be the best path forward for us to go, since we can't do everything at one time.
may I make a suggestion? It appears to me that the Zamzows building is a landmark and that the owners are invested in that site. So I don't see that building disappearing overnight.
I don't either.
So with the survey would provide you with that background information to see what else is in that area and what might be eligible, potentially eligible, and possibly what might be threatened by future development. So, that's the other thing is, as things change so quickly in our communities, the survey would at least document those historic structures that might be eligible to the register, and there would at least be a record of that if something should change rapidly.
On that site survey, when we were looking at buildings, did it include the Masonic Lodge? Because I know someone had mentioned having that one listed also.
I honestly, I have to tell you, Blaine, I think it's in that area, but I honestly can't remember. I was really focusing on residential sites, but that includes that section on Broadway, on the north side of Broadway. So that I think is the lodge within that?
I think it is.
Yes, yeah. Yes. So I think and I can check that address.
Okay.
And with these large projects, we often do them in these phases. So it's not unusual to sort of, do these big surveys in this manner. 400 properties, and that was just a guesstimate using Google Earth and, that type of thing. And it could be much fewer than that, but.
Right.
So just to confirm with the estimate that you sent, so the Main Street reconnaissance survey, the fieldwork photography, and completing the Idaho sites, ISAH, could you tell me what that acronym was?
Idaho Historic Sites Inventory Form, and it not only includes filling in the fields, but you also have to do mapping and photography, and it's all part of that.
So that part of the project would be $5,000, and you could complete that this fiscal year.
We could come pretty close. We would do our best.
I think that's our best bang for the buck, is to complete that portion of work. It would fulfill a couple of requirements for us. It would give us some more sites to look at. It would also fulfill, I think, the requirements, or start to fulfill the requirements from SHPO for our CLG status. So I think if we can get brain freeze. Think of the word I want.
So I don't know if we have any other thoughts or comments on prioritization of projects from other commissioners, maybe.
I've said my 2,000 words for the night. Anybody else have any comments or suggestions? I just leave the button pushed the whole time. That way I don't have to worry about it, Sean.
I agree with you. I'm torn as well in that the Meridian, the mill, the Zamzows mill there
Yeah.
is just so iconic. And so I would want to go to that, but I think you're right in that that's going to be there for a while. And so we should probably focus on changes that may occur on Main Street. And so I think I'd prefer to do that one as well. But I certainly wouldn't want to lose sight of the mill, and I'd want to keep that in our mind and see what we can do.
No, and I think Barbara's right. I think Zamzos is invested in that. I can't imagine them trying to go through and relocate that somewhere else. I already think they're invested in downtown Meridian. So, yeah, I'm torn. Commissioner Alt, you haven't said anything. What are your thoughts?
Mr. President, I think that we should move forward with the mapping of the registry and hold on to doing Zamzos later for the very reasons that you said. It's not going anywhere, and we don't know what's happening with the city and the registry.
So with the discussions that we've had, I guess I'm going to try and state a motion that I'll need someone else to restate. So we need a motion to approve funding for TAG to not to exceed 5,000 to complete the initial survey of, for lack of a better word, the Idaho Street area. How does that sound? Motion for TAG or an expenditure for TAG to do the initial survey on the area surrounding Idaho Street and expenditure not to exceed 5,000 to be completed by fiscal year, end of the fiscal year.
Mr. President,
Commissioner Hart, yeah.
I move to approve funding for TAG not to exceed the amount of $5,000 to complete an initial survey for the area surrounding Idaho Street and to be completed by the end of the fiscal year.
I'll second that.
Motion by Commissioner Hart, seconded by Commissioner Alt for an expenditure for TAG, to hire TAG to do initial survey on the Idaho Street area to be completed by the end of fiscal year 2022. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, that carries. So Barbara, we will get with you so we can start that work. And then hopefully with a little bit of luck, maybe we can get started on doing the mill next year at some time, depending upon unforeseen circumstances or funding. So how does that sound?
Sounds reasonable to me.
Okay. Any other questions for Barbara while we've got her?
Mr. President,
Commissioner Hart.
question, and this may be a Barbara question. When are we expected to have confirmation of the Speedway as a historical?
We will have confirmation of the Speedway by October.
So, Mr. President,
Yes.
as in anticipation of confirmation of the Speedway as a historical site, do we have interest in applying for one of those community enhancement grants for signage for that, since the due date is coming up here in about 3 weeks?
Let me ask Ms. Schiffler if she thinks she has time to look at that, or maybe we can look at that.
And I am willing to help with that.
So I do not have the capacity at the moment to work on that, but if you would like to look at that and look at the requirements, because then as the city kind of has to look through some of the requirements. So it's potentially possible if you want to look at it and then sort of we could work.
So if Commissioner Hart looks at that, and if you could possibly complete the paperwork required, get a hold of Cassandra. Barbara, if Commissioner Hart has any questions on that grant, can she get a hold of you?
Yes.
Okay, then, yeah, let's see if we can't get that done and come up with something and maybe get some additional signage. Perfect. Thank you so much. I think that's all we got for you, Barb. So thank you so much for all your work. Tremendous. I'm glad we're moving forward with it and looking forward for the letter from the Park Service.
I am too. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to work on it. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you again.
You're welcome. Have a good evening.
You too. Bye.
Bye.
With that, we will go on to, let's just combine 7, 8, and 9. They're all conferences that are coming up. So Ms. Schiffler, if you could give us a little update on all of these.
Sure. So there's some upcoming conferences, and part of being a CLG is that the commissioners sort of attend some conferences. And so there is some money in the budget that's set aside to help with some of those. They probably wouldn't cover traveling to somewhere, but some of the virtual ones potentially. So the 3 conferences that were identified, and then there's information attached to the packet for each of those, if anyone's interested in looking at them. So and Blaine's actually attended those, so might have more information about some of the specifics. But the one that's coming up just next month is in Cincinnati, Ohio, for the NAPC Forum. The Idaho Heritage Conference is in Pocatello, so that would be an easier one to travel to. And that's in September. And the Conference for Past Forward, which is online, is in November. So you might have some things to add to that.
I have done the NAPC forum online. I did last year, and there's some good online classes to attend that one. I have attended both the Idaho Heritage Conference in person and the Past Forward Conference in person. And I've done Past Forward online. They both have good information out there. From a preservation standpoint, I like Past Forward better, but it's not really geared for a city like Meridian that's, for lack of a better term, smaller. But there's some good stuff in there anyway. If you do the online for Pass Forward, that will come out of next year's budget since it's in November. But since it's online, it's not going to be that expensive to watch some of those classes. And I'd have to go back. Is there any online stuff for the Idaho Heritage Conference, or is that all in person? Do you remember, Cassandra? I tried to look through it briefly. I forgot to.
I didn't see anything for online.
Yeah. But take a look at it and see, again, by the time we do that, if someone would like to attend to that, this registration would come out of this year's budget, but by the time you got all the bills paid, it would come out of next year's budget also. So all that stuff is in your packet that was provided. So take a look at it. And if you can think of anything, I didn't see anything in the NAPC forum when I looked at it earlier that really piqued my interest. That doesn't mean there isn't something that one of the other commissioners wouldn't be interested in looking at. So I'm just going to ask, go ahead and take a look at all 3 of those. see what your thoughts are and see if we can't get some more classes in front of us, come back and present to the commission. So take a look at it, and then the NAPC forum will be done by our next meeting. But if we're able to do something online and someone attend it, watch it, then let us know. But we'll report back next month if anyone's interested in either the Idaho Heritage Conference or Pass Forward. So, boy, we'll go on to item 10, review letter. Sandra, I just briefly read that before meeting. So what is?
Yeah, so the city received the letter from the Department of the Interior about this, asking for participation, and the city sort of thought it should go through the Historic Preservation Commission. So if you review that letter, and if you haven't, you could take a look at it, but they're asking for, and I myself am not quite sure what a programmatic agreement is, but they're asking for participation, and that participation might include providing comments on the draft of that programmatic agreement, attending virtual meetings to discuss the development of the programmatic agreement, or becoming a concurring party and staying involved. So if that's something that the commission thinks that the city could do or should do, then we'd want you to let the city know if you're interested in being involved. The city itself, there wasn't really anyone jumping for participation, but wanted to sort of run it through the Historic Preservation Commission. I'll try to answer questions as best I can, but.
Tell you what, I don't see, it says within 30 days. Reply, when was this sent out?
It was I think it was last week. It was after we did the agenda setting meeting. So I think it was within the last week.
Okay. Let me reach out to them in an email. I'll copy you and see if I can get some more information. And then if it's something that we think.
Yeah, if it's something that you think would be beneficial for the city to have participation,
Mhm.
then we would participate. But if it seems, yeah, let you take a look and see if you think we should participate.
Do what I can do. All righty. With that, any other comments, questions, suggestions, queries? Notes? Then our next meeting is July 28th, 2022. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Mr. President,
Commissioner Hart.
I move that we adjourn.
I'll second that.
Motion by Commissioner Hart, seconded by Commissioner Alt for adjournment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, we are done. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. We got through that faster than I thought we were going to. Thank you. Bye.